University started back in 1940. It was founded by Dominican Catholic sisters, and they bought a law school about 10 years ago, and I've been with them ever since. Basically, as you heard from our plenary speaker, what a lot of libraries are starting to look at is a way to digitize work that they have, either be it a faculty publication, law review articles, just anything that you sort of want to share out in the public domain and make it easily accessible. And so I was looking at ways, my main objective was to try to keep it cheap. And the best way to go about that is to use Linux, which is a free operating system that you can download off the internet. And I found a program out there that was developed by HP and MIT called DSpace. And basically, what is DSpace? And DSpace is basically the software of choice for academic, nonprofit, and commercial organizations that are building open digital repositories. Like I said, it is free and it's completely customizable to fit the needs of any organization. Why would you want to use DSpace? The biggest reason is there's a huge community of users and developers out there worldwide. It's not just HP and MIT anymore. If you get on their listservs or any of their forums, you have a question, you want to customize it, there's a million people that are out there that can answer your question and can help you, find the answer that you're looking for. Again, it's open source, so if you're good enough, you can modify it yourself without even having to ask the question. It's completely customizable to fit your needs. It's used by plenty of educational organizations, government, private, and commercial institutions. It can be installed right out of the box. All you have to do is download it off the internet from their website. And like I said, it can manage and preserve all types of digital content. So it can house PDF documents, Word documents, PowerPoint, Windows Media, MP3s, you name it. If it's digital, it can basically store it and allow your users or your students to have access to it. Basically, if you're creating a digital repository, what software is out there that can be used? Basically, the best known examples out there are going to be DSpace. I don't know if any of you all have heard of ePrints. That's also another one that you can download and install. Fedora, dLibra, and the Greenstone digital library software. In 2009, just recently, Fedora Commons and DSpace merged, and now they're creating a new organization called DSpace, and so eventually DSpace will probably be called DSpace. Just to give you a little background on DSpace, I sort of grabbed this video off their website. If I can get my mouse to work here. Go back.
Welcome to this introduction to DSpace. Originally developed by HP and MIT, DSpace is the software of choice for academic, non-profit, and commercial organizations building open digital repositories. The open-source software application DSpace now offers a comprehensive solution for your organization to manage, provide access to, preserve, and share your digital assets. DSpace preserves and enables easy and open access to all types of digital content, including text, images, moving images, audio, and datasets. The software is free, easy to install out of the box, and is completely customizable to fit the needs of any organization. Currently, nearly 500 preeminent research institutions worldwide use DSpace and form a large community of users and enthusiasts. Together with a group of motivated developers, often affiliated to a specific institution, they ensure development and support in the long term. The DSpace open source platform was built on the concept of open knowledge sharing and long-term preservation. Organizations such as universities, museums, research labs, and commercial institutions are using DSpace to create their own repositories and share their research output with the world. Institutions use DSpace for a variety of different content types. Aside from electronic theses, dissertations, and scientific publications, you can also access art collections, cultural heritage resources, or audio and video clips. Let's now take a closer look at some of the ways administrators and users actually use DSpace. The software can be installed and configured in less than a day if you use the standard setup on a regular Linux or Windows server. Administrators can easily create a hierarchy of communities and collections. Communities typically represent departments, which are areas of research within an institution. Collections are subsets of communities. Responsibilities for reviewing incoming content can be delegated to different people for every collection. Once our administrator has created a community and collection, registered users can start submitting content to a collection. During the submission process, a user is presented with a series of mandatory and optional fields to complete, known as the item's metadata. These fields can be fully customized by the administrator and can differ from collection to collection. Standard metadata fields would include author, title, and abstract, for example. The full set of Dublin core fields is a part of the standard configuration. However, mets, mods, and other standards can easily be implemented. After completing the description, the user can choose one or more files to attach to the item, together with a description for each file. In the very last step, the user needs to accept the collection's license. These licenses can also be customized by the administrator and make it very clear for users to what extent the submitted information is being distributed. After a collections editor reviews the submitted description and files, the item will appear in the collection. It also becomes immediately accessible through the DSpace browse and search functions. Browsing the communities and collections will show you the structure of the repository. Every community and collection has a home page offering relevant contextual information. There are also options to browse the content by different indexes, including title, date, and author. The simple search page offers a Google-like search interface, displaying the results sorted by relevance. Advanced search allows you to specify which fields should contain specific words or sentences. Most search engines, such as Google, keep a close eye on publicly available DSpace sites. This means any information in your repository that is publicly available is indexed by all popular search engines and therefore can be found easily through keyword search. In some cases, more than 60% of the repository's visitors arrive through a search engine. Even after 6 years of intense development, DSpace continues to evolve to meet the ever-changing needs of the community and to take advantage of new technologies and web-based services. From preserving endangered Afghani manuscripts to creating virtual museums, organizations are pioneering ways DSpace can be used for a wide variety of purposes. The DSpace Foundation brings together a diverse group of organizations from over 50 countries. The role of the foundation is to lead the collaborative development of the...
All right. So that's sort of a little intro to give you an idea of what DSpace is for and how you can sort of navigate it a little bit. Now to the nitty-gritty. Basically, what I'm going to try to show you is the quick and dirty on how to get this up and running if you're running a Linux environment. Specifically, we use Fedora. I like Fedora. All of our servers are 64-bit, so the one I'm going to show is related to the 64-bit version, but the installation procedures I'm going to go through are the same for 32-bit software. You really don't need a super powerful machine to run DSpace. Depending on how large you think your digital repository will get, you may need a lot of storage space, especially if you're going to be storing a lot of video files, a lot of MP3s and stuff like that. So that's something to keep in mind. But as far as the server architecture, it'll run fine on a Pentium 3, Pentium 4. The one that we're currently running at the law school is running on an AMD 64 machine. So basically, first thing, if you've ever installed Fedora, you'll be familiar with these screens, but after you pop in the CD, you turn on the computer, it's going to ask you what you want to do. And I typically like to install as much software as possible. That way I don't ever have to go back out and download anything that I need for the installation. So I go ahead and I checkbox the Office for Productivity, the software development, the web server, and at the very bottom I choose Customize Now. And on the next screen, when you get to the Customize screen, it'll ask you what things you want to install. And what you can do is if you right-click on any of these selections on the right-hand side, such as the Genome desktop environment, it'll give you an option to select all optional packages. So I go through one by one and select all optional packages. When you get to the development part, the one thing I do leave off is Java development. Everything else, I select all optional packages. Basically, DSpace is built around Java, and the Java that comes distributed with Fedora is an open source version. It's fairly compatible with Sun's Java, but it's not completely compatible, and there are some issues with DSpace. So unselect the Java component. With the web server, I usually unselect that as well, even though it's checked right here. And DSpace also uses PostgreSQL as its backend database, so you need to check mark the PostgreSQL database. I don't use virtualization under the base system, and I also get rid of Java for the base system. And once you get done selecting all those, you get your standard installation screens where it shows all the packages that it's copied, and eventually when it's done, it'll reboot and take you to this screen. In your welcome screen, it asks you some simple information such as create a username. You put that in, and eventually you'll get to a login window in Fedora, and just log in under whatever username and password you created, and you'll get to your main desktop. The first thing you want to do is you want to remove any instance of Java. Even though we didn't checkmark Java in the installation screens, there's still some remnants of Java that are within Fedora. And so what you need to do is you need to run a command called yum remove Java asterisk. And what that does is that tells it, yum is sort of a package installation program for Fedora, and it makes it easy to install and uninstall packages. Basically what we're telling it is to remove anything that deals with Java on the system. And that'll go ahead and remove everything. And then you have to install what's called compat libraries, and that's necessary for you to be able to actually download and install the Sun Java system. So if you type yum install compat-lib asterisk, that will go ahead and download all the compat libraries. By the way, all these screenshots are on my PowerPoint, so if I'm going too fast, just let me know, or you can just download the PowerPoint. That'll install the compatibility libraries. And at this point, you're ready to go ahead and grab Sun's Java. And here's the URL that you would go to. Now, Java has two different packages that you can install. One is a development kit, which is the one that you're going to want to grab. The other one is just simply, it's sort of stripped down Java, and that would make it so you can run Java applications in Firefox or other applications. So when you get there, you're going to go ahead and choose your platform. In this case, I'm running the 64-bit version of Fedora, so my platform is Linux x64. And it'll go ahead and download it to the system. And right now, it's downloading it to my home directory in a folder called download. So what I need to do here after it's downloaded is I need to change directory to home jwest download. ls is the same thing for those that are familiar with Windows, is dir, a directory, tells you what's in that directory. And you can see that it downloaded the JDK into that directory. What Java tells you is you need to go ahead and make that file executable, and that's what the next command is. It's chmod 777 asterisk, meaning that change any file that's in that directory to an executable. And then once it's executable, then you can go ahead and move it to a directory that is accessible by everybody, not just your home directory. So in my case, I just made a directory called user Java. And on the next line, what I did is I moved the file that we downloaded into that user Java folder. And then I changed directory to get in there. And then the final command is how you execute that particular file. Anytime you do a period / it means execute, and then I'm telling it anything with the .bin extension, which is that file that we downloaded. That'll pull up this next screen, which gives you a whole bunch of licensing terms, and you've got to scroll down forever through that thing, and eventually it'll ask you, do you agree with the terms, yes or no? Go ahead and type yes, and it will go ahead and extract the files that are in there, and it will install them for you. And after that's done, you can type Java-version, and it should show up as the Java that you just installed, which is 1.60, I think release 4 or 14. Once you got Java installed, you need to run this little command called sbin ldconfig. That's going to register some of those compat libraries that we downloaded. And then we need to set up a path statement. So basically, any application will know where the Java resides that we just downloaded and installed. To do that, you have to go into a directory called etcprofile.d. And we need to create a file called java.sh. gedit is sort of like Notepad in Linux. If you type gedit space the name of the file that you're trying to do, it'll bring up sort of a Notepad environment. And in there, basically we type this verbatim. And what this is doing is it's telling the operating system where the Java that you just downloaded and installed is located at. So anytime you boot up the machine, any application, once you get logged in, will know where to access that Java. And finally, after you get done creating that file, you need to make it executable. So the same command, chmod 777 java.sh. And then you'll reboot the machine. And now we need to install a program called Ant. And this is the URL where you go to install it. And what is Ant? Basically, Ant's a Java-based build tool. In theory, it's kind of like a make utility. Those familiar with Unix and Linux know that when you compile the C program, you have to use make. It basically makes life a lot easier when you're trying to build Java applications. So basically, you'll go to the Ant website, which is hosted by Apache, and their latest version is 1.71. And you can download any version. I typically download the tar.gz version. And it'll be in that same download directory. Whatever your username you chose, it'll be /home/username download. And the next command is basically what you're doing is unzipping or uncompressing that file. So if you type in tar xvfc *.gz, it's going to go ahead and uncompress this Ant package that we downloaded. After you get done uncompressing it, if you do a directory, you'll see that it created a directory called Apache-Ant-1.71. That's where the executable will be. And I want to move that into a common directory instead of my home directory, so I just created a directory called user Ant. And in there I moved all the files. Well, first of all, I changed into that directory, into that Apache directory that got created, and I moved all the files that were in there to the user Ant directory. And then after I got done doing that, I just went ahead and I do cleanup all the time, so I removed any files that were in my download directory. The second thing that you need to download is a program called Maven. And the URL is up there to download Maven. Basically, Maven is a software tool for Java project management and build automation. Basically, what it will do is, I believe it reads off an XML file, but it will go out and it will download any Java code that you need for your specific project. And helps do like package management and stuff like that with any kind of Java code. So we'll go to their website. Again, the latest version is 2.1.0, and I downloaded the tar.gz version. And again, it's going to download into your download directory, and same command to uncompress that file. That's the tar xvfc *.gz, and that's going to create an Apache-Maven directory. And again, I want to move that out into a common directory, so I'm going to create a directory called user Maven, and I'm going to go into that Apache directory and move everything out into the user Maven directory. And finally, I did more cleanup, so I just deleted the files that were in that. Right here, what we're doing, I'm changing the directory to the bin directory. The bin directory is where Linux stores a lot of the files that are needed by the operating system to perform maintenance commands, you name it. For those familiar with Windows, it's sort of like your Windows command directory. And what the next two commands are doing is they're called symbolic links. And what I'm doing is I'm telling it to create a file named ant and a file named mvn in that bin directory that actually point to the user directories that I created and moved those applications into. So ln-s means create a symbolic link where the binary or the executable for the ant program is located in is user ant bin ant, and space ant meaning that's how you want to call it, and if you wanted to call it something else you could do any name, but I just keep it the same as before. Now after doing those two commands, you can be in any directory within the Linux operating system and issue the command ant or mvn and it will run. You don't have to actually specify where it's located at. So after you get done doing that, you can go ahead and you can type ant-version or mvn-version, and it should tell you that, if you look at the bottom of the screen here, it will say Apache Maven 2.10, and it tells you when it was built, and tells you the Java version, and also gives you your ant version. So you know that they're now, you can now issue those commands within Linux. The next thing we have to get is called Apache Tomcat. And what Apache Tomcat is it's a Java servlet. It's a web server, and it uses Java servlets to create the HTML that you see on the screen. The latest edition, I believe, is 6.0, and so if you go out to the Tomcat website, you can Google Tomcat, it'll take you there. You'll download the file, and again, I downloaded the tar.gz file. I had a couple incorrect commands there. It'll create the Apache Tomcat directory, and in there, we're going to do the same thing with ant and maven. I moved it to a directory that can be used by anybody, so I just made a directory called user tomcat, and I moved all the files in that directory out to user tomcat. If you go to the user tomcat directory, there'll be a bin directory, and in that bin directory at the bottom are all these files. These are commands that you would issue either to start up the Tomcat server or to shut down the Tomcat server and some other things that perform some maintenance on it. If you do /startup.sh, that will actually start the Tomcat server. And as you can see on this page, if you open up your web browser and go to localhost :8080, that will actually bring up the web page, the default web page for Tomcat. Tomcat by default always goes to port 8080. In this instance, I actually like it just to be on a standard port. I don't like to redirect to 8080, and I'll show you how you can make Tomcat listen on port 80, which is the standard web port. If you go to the user Tomcat config directory, there's a file in there called server.xml, and we want to edit that file. And there'll be a section in there that will be different colors than the rest called connector. And right there, originally it said connector port equals 8080. I changed that to connector port equals 80, so that way when you're typing in your web browser, whatever your domain name might be, like for us it's law-dspace, so if you typed in law-dspace, that's all you have to type in. You wouldn't have to type in law-dspace :8080 to bring up the web page. And finally, you need to add one line to that section. It's at the very bottom, and it's URI encoding equals UTF-8. And what that's doing is telling the Tomcat server that you're using Unicode for the encoding. And you'll go ahead and save that file. And the next thing we need to do is we need to initialize the Postgres database to be able to handle the DSpace. And the first thing you do within Fedora is you type service, Postgres, QL, initdb. And you should get an OK after you perform that command. And what that does is it initializes the database for Postgres. The second command you type is service PostgreSQL start, and that actually starts the Postgres database. Once you get it started, there's a couple configurations you need to do in Postgres, and the directory that you need to go to is var lib pgsql/data. And in that directory, you're going to see a file called postgresql.config, and you need to edit that configuration file. I've used Vi forever. You can use gedit, whatever editor floats your boat in Linux. In that file, there's only one line that you need to change, and where you see the cursor there, originally that's going to be commented by, it'll have a pound sign in front of it. You just need to remove that pound sign so it listens on the local host. You can also change that to asterisk if you want it to listen on all addresses, but localhost is fine as well. And then you'll go ahead and save out of that file. And then there's one other file you need to edit to configure your PostgreSQL database, and that's the pg_hba.config file. This file basically sets the security on your Postgres database. In there you're going to have 3 lines that you're actually going to modify, where you notice it says trust. By default in Postgres, that's going to say identity and same user, I believe. It'll have 2 words in there. Basically, all you need to do is just remove those 2 words and change it to trust. And what that's going to do is allow the database to accept connections from other sources. If you don't change that, the DSpace program can't access the Postgres database. In fact, pretty much nothing can access it except for the Postgres user. So once you save that, all you need to do is restart the Postgres service, and to do that, you type service PostgreSQL restart, and that'll restart the service, and then now you have full access to your database. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a DSpace database. To do that, Fedora creates a user called Postgres, and you need to log in under that user, and to do that you type in su-l Postgres, and that will put you in the rights of that user, and from there you need to create a user called DSpace. And to do that, you're going to issue the command create user -u Postgres -d-a-p DSpace. That's going to go ahead and create your DSpace user. And then after you do that, you need to create the database. And to do that, you type in create db-u DSpace, meaning that's the user that's going to have access to it, -e Unicode, letting you know it's going to be a Unicode database, and then DSpace. Just as a side note, the reason why you're doing it Unicode is that depending on what country you're going to be in, there's special characters, and if you don't issue those commands, anything that has a special character won't be accepted. You don't have to do this, but I typically do this just to make life a little bit easier. If you click on, in Fedora, if you click on System and go to Administration, there'll be an SE Linux drop-down. I couldn't take a screenshot of it, but when you pull that up, I always disable SE Linux. If you're good enough, you can configure SE Linux not to interfere with the operation of DSpace. I haven't gotten that far, so in this case, I went ahead and just disabled it. The other thing I do is under System Administration, there's going to be a Services drop-down. In there, you can highlight the PostgreSQL, and up in the upper left-hand corner, you can click on Enable. And what that does is, if the server ever has to reboot, it will automatically restart the Postgres database. If you don't do that, then you have to manually type in the command to start it every time you reboot your server. After you get done doing that, I went ahead and rebooted the system, and finally get to the point where you're going to actually configure DSpace. What you want to do is go to the dspace.org website, and the latest version they have is 1.52, and you'll download that to your computer and extract it. And I moved the same commands that we did with and Maven, I moved all those files into a common directory called user DSpace. And once you get them moved, you're going to go into user DSpace config. And the file that you're going to be concerned with is called dspace.cfg. And if you edit that file, it's going to ask you some questions about where you want the installation to go. The first one is the dspace.directory, and in our case, I put it in user DSpace, so that's where my installation directory is going to be. It's going to ask for the DSpace URL. If you already have a valid domain, you could have it as http://www.berry.edu/dspace, wherever you're going to house it on your web server. In this case, it was just a local installation, so I chose localhost. The host name is just localhost. I didn't have a domain name for this. And then you can give the name of your site. In this case, I did DSpace at Berry University. You also have to tell it what database you're using. DSpace will allow you to use both Oracle and PostgreSQL. Postgres is free, Oracle's not, so we went with Postgres. You just have to uncomment a couple of these lines, and any of the ones that say Postgres, you basically just remove the pound in front of it. By default, the username and password for the database is DSpace, and by default in the config file, it's going to be DSpace. But if for some reason you chose a different username and password when you're creating that database, you would have to alter those lines right there. And then it asks you for mail requirements, such as if you get users that register, it'll email you and let you know that they registered, so you have to put your mail server. If you have to authenticate, you'll put your username and password for the mail server. And then it asks you what do you want the addresses to be for certain types of mail. You can put in a valid email address, or by default they give you the dspace-no reply, dspace-help, and those types of things. I didn't change those, but if I wanted it to return to a valid email address, I put either my email address or somebody else's. Those are really the only lines that you need to edit within that configuration file. And now it gets to the point of actually configuring and creating your DSpace packages, and that's what Maven is for. So what I'm going to do and go back from the config directory. If you go to the user DSpace directory and type mbn package, that will go ahead and that will actually start building the application. And it goes out, you'll need access to the internet because it goes out and it downloads a whole bunch of Java packets that are necessary for DSpace to run. When it gets done, in this case it took about 4 minutes, it'll tell you that the build was successful, and then you can go to the point of installing it. And to install it, you need to go to where it actually put these files that it downloaded using the Maven application, and that's going to be located under user DSpace, target, and then DSpace. I did asterisk, but it's actually DSpace-1.52. Once you get in that directory, you'll type ant space fresh_install, and that will move all your files to where they need to be located at, as well as build them. And if it's successful, at the bottom you'll get a build successful. And then finally, we need to move the applications that it created, the Java application, into your Tomcat directory. And basically, your Tomcat directory has, it's under user Tomcat web apps, there's a directory called root. And root is that default web page we saw when we pulled up the web browser. And what I'm doing here is I'm just moving that root directory to a backup, and then making a new root directory where I'm going to put all these DSpace files that got created. The DSpace files are located under user DSpace web apps JSPUI. And if I go into that directory, what I'm going to do is copy everything. And what the -rf means is recursive enforce. So just it copies all directories, all files within that directory, and I'm copying it over into the user Tomcat web apps root directory. Once you copy over those files, you now have a working DSpace installation. Once you pull it up with your web browser under localhost, make sure that you can get to it. You need to create an administrator. Oh, well, one other thing. If you want Tomcat to load every time you reboot your server, you need to go into a directory called etc rc-d or .d, and you need to edit a file called rc.local. And in there, I just created a line called user tomcat bin startup.sh, which is the script that will start up your Tomcat server. And that way, if you ever reboot your server, it automatically restarts the Tomcat server for you. And finally, under the user DSpace bin directory, there's a little application called Create Administrator. And if you launch that file, it will ask you what the email address is for the administrator, first name, last name. In this case, I put the password as DSpace, and it'll ask you to confirm that password. And once that's done, then the rest can be done all through the web interface. That's the hard part, and the rest you can go in and you can create users, you can create collections, communities, set permissions on communities, all that kind of stuff can all now be done with the web browser, which makes it pretty easy to administer. Who's using DSpace? Washburn University School of Law, not specifically just the School of Law, actually the whole university uses DSpace. The law school is one of their communities. One of the things you can do with DSpace is if you have a school of podiatry, law school, school business, each one of those would be their own community, and then within there you can create your collections. So under the law school you may have an environmental law collection, you may have a criminal law collection, and within there you'd have all the different documents or videos, MP3s that you'd want to submit to that particular area. Also, the University of New Mexico is currently using DSpace, and they put their faculty publications and faculty articles out there on the internet for anybody really to be able to get to. Also, University of Cambridge is a big user of DSpace, and their law puts out scholarship and their articles and makes it publicly available out there on the internet. You may have seen in the intro that the Smithsonian Institute uses it for some of their art collections. So it's got a pretty good community out there of people that use it. Let me pull up. We're fairly new to using DSpace, but we have a working installation. And we're starting to try to get our faculty to submit some publications to it. This is our installation, and we've been playing with it as far as figuring out how to create the communities and how to create the collections. We started off just doing one with the American Bar Association, and that gave us the ability to see how to put in the title, the author, all the information that it requires. Some of these metadata fields you can go in and customize. So you can actually add some if you feel they're pertinent to your collection, or you can actually remove them. One of them that we will probably remove, that our particular DSpace installation is not available to the public. And so where it says URI and it has the handle.net, that's really not pertinent to our installation. That would be pertinent if you had a public installation. And so you can go in and you can remove that particular field from the metadata. And let me just show you how to post it. once you get logged in, you can go to communities and collections, and it'll allow you to create a top-level community. So let's say I was doing it for the School of Podiatry. Spelling that right. And it allows you to give it a short description. You can have introductory text, copyright text, sidebar text. If you noticed during the main screen on the right-hand side, they had an area that had some text. If you put it in there, it's going to populate that area. And you can also put a logo. If each school has their own logo, you can upload that logo, and then you can actually set authorizations where you can say, these people are allowed to actually use this particular community. And once you put that all in, you can hit create. And then you'll actually have your community, and then you can create collections within, you can create subcommunities or collections within those. When you go to create collections, it'll ask you some information as far as, whether the new items can be publicly readable or whether they're private to people that are just authorized to submit to that community or that collection. You can say whether some users or no users basically will be able to submit, and give you a couple options there. Gives you the ability to describe your collection. Same thing, you have some introductory text, copyright text, sidebar. You can put in what kind of license, whether it's public license, private, and then after you get done, hit next. And this is where you can set your authorizations on the people that can submit to that particular collection. In this case, I'm going to say that our head of technical services can. And you can go through and you can update it. It's just asking you, is all the information correct? And then you can do update. Once you go into the actual collection, this is now where you can go ahead and you can submit, whether it be a PDF file or Word document. You can say submit to collection. It'll ask you, does it have more than one tile? Has it been published before? And does it have more than one file? In this case, we'll just say no on all of those. You'll put in the author of the document, whatever the title may be. Whether there's a series or number assigned to the item by the community. There are identifiers. You can have the ISSN number, ISMN, government doc number, ISBN, URI. In this case, we're not going to put anything in there. You can say, they give you a whole bunch of choices as far as what it is. If it's, let's see, I'm not going to do a video, but we'll just say it's a technical report. By default, it's going to go to the language that you installed it under, which is going to be English, but you can actually choose other languages in here. You can put in keywords. You can add as many keywords as you want in there. That's going to help when when users are actually going there and they're searching for a document. That's going to help them find the document a little bit easier. If there's an abstract, you can type it in there. Sponsors and description. I'm not going to put anything in there. Finally, you'll get to the point where you can actually browse for the document. In this case, let's see here. Grab whatever document you want. It'll ask you if is it a Microsoft Word document? It is, so click next. It'll ask you to verify verify the submission, make sure that all the information that you put in there is correct. And this is where it gives you your license information. Say I grant the license. And then finally, now that that's submitted, when you're at the home page, I'm going to log out here so we're like the general public. And you'll notice that now there's a community called School of Podiatry. We'll see that there's a foot collection in there. And it actually tells us our recent submissions over here. So you'll see that that document's in there, and when you click on it, it'll allow you to open it. And then from that point, the user can save it to their computer, or they can just flip through the document and read it. And that's sort of the quick and dirty on how to get DSpace installed. Hope it wasn't too technical, but when we originally tried to install it, we ran into a lot of caveats and a lot of problems, and I figured it might help for those people that are using Fedora that get sort of a streamlined way of getting it installed at your institution.
Jeff,
Yeah.
how long did it take you
To get it installed? Now that I know how to do it, about an hour. Take about an hour. When I originally started doing it, after tons of research out on Google and stuff like that, it probably took about 2 weeks because I kept on running into a snag. It would be, you missed this part, or you missed this part. And even though on DSpace website they say it's easy to install out of the box, that's not necessarily true. They do have a live CD, however, I should mention that. You can download a live CD that you can actually boot off the CD, and it'll give you a live DSpace installation. The only problem with it is you can't use it in a production environment. It just allows you to play around with it to become familiar with it. When you do become familiar, you still need to install it on a real server in order to house the data and customize it and all those other things. Yes?
Two questions. Are the documents stored inside the database or out on the file system?
They're out on the file system, and they're actually stored in bitstream format. I don't know if I can have it away. The reference to the file is stored within the database. And so basically, if you're backing up DSpace, there's like a pg dump command for Postgres. That'll back up your SQL to one file. And then you can move that to another file server. There's one directory that has all the documents that you would have in your DSpace installation. They have really cryptic names. They'll be made out of numbers and letters, and they can be 64 characters long or something like that. And that's what the database reference is. But no, it doesn't, like if you out on the file system, you're not going to see ecspooler.doc.
And then the second question is, I'm assuming there's an API to pull the information from DSpace into other pages, so that you would get, for example, the latest 5 uploads to DSpace, on your website or something like that. Have you all experimented with that?
I haven't gotten to that yet, but yes, there is. I'm a member of their listserv, and I've seen that question asked before. And so yes, I mean there is a way that you can pull that. So if you wanted to put that on your main university website or something, yeah, you can pull it in.
Along the same lines, I looked at DSpace about 6 months ago, and is there stats, aggregation, and reporting in there? It's not prepackaged with it. What do people do for that? Because we run ePrints right now, and the stats reporting and people's upload rates and view rates, the view rates are the biggest. That's what entices them to put stuff in there.
Right. From what I've seen, and I may be wrong on this, but it doesn't really have a lot of good information from the stats point of view. There was actually a question that was asked by a librarian that was over in Europe, and they were looking at transitioning like 6 million documents into DSpace, and she wasn't concerned that DSpace could handle it, but she was concerned about the statistics, and she wanted to see how many people were looking at this and how many, and I think that's something that probably is, in time will come, but I don't, to be honest with you, I don't think it's here. I could be wrong.
But
So then, is it true that DSpace is focused mostly on metadata that will be entered by actual people, not generated by a scanner or data extraction?
Well, that's a good question. Basically, you have to put it in. However, you don't necessarily have to put it in through the web interface.
Right.
As I was showing, there are import features. So as long as, if you had a Excel document or something that had everything that you needed, you could pull that in, and do a massive import. Yes.
How about tying it into LDAP or
Yes.
Active Directory?
Yes, it does tie into LDAP. That's my next step.
That's your next step.
Yep.
Just FYI, the Jumpbox folks just released a prepackaged DSpace install. Downloaded a virtual machine. It's Ubuntu instead of Fedora underneath, but it's good, probably a good way to try with it.
Oh, really? So that it's actually like you download the virtual machine and run it through?
Power it up.
Yep.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Jumpbox.
Okay.
That's probably not a free one. You probably have to have the subscription for it all, but you get access to all the virtual appliances from Jumpbox. I have a subscription. Comes in handy.
Yeah.
Jumpbox these days.
Is that something
They have
you-
like tier. I think it starts at like $99 for like maybe 2 Jumpboxes, and like $300 for any one install of like everything they have. That kind of formula. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but that's kind of basically how it goes.
Right. And then, when you're getting started, that's definitely a lot easier than, I guess it really depends on, how much you played with Linux and how familiar you are with it. If you follow the steps that I had in there verbatim, you'll have a running installation. I've gone over it 4 or 5 times and it works every single time. But, some people may not want to get their hands that dirty, so.
I like proof of concept stuff with virtual machines. They go back and put it on real
Yeah,
hardware.
exactly.
So my assumption is, given that it's a Postgres / Java app, if people are really uncomfortable with the thought of Linux as their OS, they can run it off Windows.
It will run on Windows. I didn't go that route.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that-
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can install it on Windows, and I would imagine the same prerequisites. As long as you installed the latest Java JDK on your Windows box, and had Ant and Maven, probably the commands are a little bit different, but I'm sure you can get it up and running on Windows. However, does Postgres run on Windows?
I think there is
Is
Postgres
there?
for Windows.
That part-
I've
that
never-
part I
I've
don't know.
never-
I don't
I've
think it's
never
easy,
run
but I
it.
think you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. I've never even seen Postgres for Windows, but if it runs on Windows, sure. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys coming today.